This week we are studying Parashat Tisa, and Tisa is very, we could call it famous or infamous for the unfortunate act that the Jewish people committed by serving the golden calf, the Egel HaZahav in Hebrew, the golden calf, which was extremely tragic. We're going to go into very specific details this evening. But before we go into that, I wanted to share what the Zera Shimshon has to share on this part. A very important lesson. This lesson is really a lesson that is extrapolated from our basic commentaries on the Torah, but with a fascinating question based on the Talmud and a very practical, inspirational answer for us all. Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. So as an introduction, the Torah commands, God commands to the Jewish people the construction of the Mishkan. Now remember last week we went back and forth, what came first? This was with Rabbi Leib. Did God command the Mishkan before the Jewish people sinned the golden calf, or did the golden calf come first and then God commanded the Mishkan as a means of atonement? We said most of the opinions agree that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was given to the Jewish people as a means of atonement after they sinned with the golden calf. This was the overwhelming majority of opinions, although there are those that argue. Having said that, after Hashem commanded the Jewish people to construct the Mishkan, he recommanded the Jewish people about one of the most important mitzvot in our Torah. It's so important, it made it to the top 5, or amongst the top 5 of the 10 commandments on the tablets. And that is the commandment of observing Shabbat. So God tells the Jewish people to construct the Mishkan, to build the Mishkan, specific details outlined, and then Hashem recommands the Jewish people about the observance of the holy Shabbat. This teaches us, our sages tell us, that as holy, as great, as needed was the Mishkan, the tabernacle, along with allowing Hashem's presence to be physically, spiritually, right there and then, Hashem says, do not desecrate the Shabbat in order to build, to construct, to put together the Mishkan. As important as it is to have the whole of Hashem, do not desecrate the Shabbat in order to have that home of Hashem. So this comes as a proof that, at least to show the Jewish people how important this great gift of Shabbat is. Hashem's home, the ultimate, still Shabbat, overrides that. With that introduction, the Zera Shimshon shares with us a piece of Talmud. I want to share it with you. Tonight we're going to get a little educational. We're going to get in the text. Take a look at your screen. So I want to look at this verse, first of all, in this week's Parasha. V'shamiru, it's a very famous verse. We say this every Saturday morning when we do our Kiddush. V'shamiru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. This is the famous verse in Exodus chapter 31, verse 16, that tells us, thus shall the children of Israel observe the Sabbath, to make the Sabbath throughout their generations an everlasting covenant. And so it is, as the Talmud tells us, the Sabbath is a covenant that Hashem made with the Jewish people. He obligated us to observe the Shabbat just as he did when he created the world. He worked, he created for 6 days. The 7th day he rested. We are to work and create the first 6 days of the week, and the 7th is to rest. Now look at the Talmud. This is in Masechet Shabbat, page 118a. And we're going to read it in Hebrew. I'll paraphrase it, translate it. Well, here, let me open up this window a little more so it'll be easier for you to see. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yosef. Very important Gemara. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Zera Shimshon quotes. Kol hame'aneg et haShabbat, any person who enjoys Shabbat, notenin lo nachala bli mitzarim. From Shamayim, from heaven, they are given a boundless portion. And the proof to this, very often the Talmud brings a proof from the verse, Shneimar, as the verse says, Az tit'anag al Hashem v'irkavticha al bamot ha'aretz, v'hachalticha nachalot Yaakov avicha v'gomer. As the verse states, then you shall delight in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the heights of the world, and to feast on the inheritance of Jacob your father. Now, the Talmud continues and says, Lo ki Avraham, this gift, this promise, this merit that is given to the Jewish people who observe and enjoy me'aneg and enjoy the Shabbat, is not like it was said by Abraham, shekatuv bo kumi talech ba'aretz le'orka, not like Abraham that was given only the borders of Israel. Velo ki Yitzchak, and also not like Isaac, says the Talmud, shekatuv bo, as the pasuk says, ki lecha uzarcha ten et kol ha'aratzot takel, that all of the land was given. Rather, the Talmud says, Ela ki Yaakov, the gift, the merit is like that was said about Yaakov, that says, Ufaratzta yama v'kedma v'tzapona v'negba, that you will be spread out east, west, east, north, and south, all over, a blessing with no boundaries, meaning it's an everlasting blessing. It says on this, so this is what the Talmud says. Again, as a paraphrase, the Talmud says, anyone who enjoys, who delights the Shabbat, takes pleasure in Shabbat, is given a reward without bounds, without borders. Asks the Zera Shimshon 2 questions. How could there be no borders, no boundaries? This world in and of itself has borders and boundaries. So how can there be a blessing that has no boundaries? Furthermore, question number 2, the Zera Shimshon says, if many people enjoy the Shabbat and take delight in Shabbat, how can each person have a merit of a boundless, everlasting merit? Wouldn't there have to be some type of borders? My merit infringing upon yours and yours upon mine, there must be a set and delineated border. So the Zera Shimshon says we cannot say that this merit is talking about a merit in the world to come, because that just is taken away from the entire element of what makes this blessing so special, what makes this merit so special, that one who enjoys and takes delight in Shabbat has a boundless reward. Of course, all mitzvot have a merit in the world to come, but here we're talking about a nachala bli mitzarim, a portion that has no bounds. It must be something here in this world. And therefore, the Zera Shimshon says, something doesn't make too much sense, and let's understand exactly what's going on. So the Zera Shimshon says there's always the following concepts that are taking place. On one hand, Hashem wants to bestow good to every single person, without boundaries. Just complete good, non-stop. Le'ativ, as our great sages say, to do good unto us. That's why he created the world, to give. However, when a person has a lack of merit, because they indulge in worldly pleasures, there's a strict judgment which holds back all that good that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to bestow upon that specific person. And this is a part of the way how Hashem created the world to run. There's always this duality of Hashem wanting to bestow everlasting and boundless blessings. Yet on the other hand, a person has the free will to indulge in physical pleasure or not. And the more a person bases or debases themselves to attach to the physical aspects of the world, they unfortunately close the valves of that everlasting, boundless blessing that comes from Hashem. There's a constant chesed versus din, mercy versus judgment. And this is what's constantly happening. Now, the power, the Zera Shimshon says, the power of prosecution and harm is only strengthened when a person falls in and gives into their desires and worldly pleasures. When a person is nonstop running after the rat race of life, a person is nonstop trying to see how much more can they eat, how much more can they drink, how much more can they sleep, how much more can they travel, and more and more and more and more and more. That is what, unfortunately, pushes away the godliness that is in us. Not because we're not supposed to have physical aspects to our life. Of course we are supposed to. We have this duality that we're created with. But it's about harnessing it, about controlling it, about directing it to help us grow in our spiritual realms as well. Now, it's easier to be spoken about and to be said than done. But that is the goal. The goal is to obviously understand that the physical aspects of our life are there as a means for the greater goal and purpose of life, and that is our spiritual achievements and missions with Hashem, with our family, with Klal Yisrael, and obviously with the Torah. Now, one who feeds and makes a clear focus and intention, says Zera Shimshon, who tries to feed their soul by serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is no judgment that will come on a person and control a person. That's if they're 100% for Hashem, which is almost impossible. But in such a case, all of Hashem's abundance comes down with no bounds. So that's obviously impossible. So we're still left with this duality. Comes as Zera Shimshon says, the Zohar tells us that on Shabbat, all judgment rests. All the prosecutors, all the prosecuting angels and celestial beings, all rest on Shabbat. With this, the Zera Shimshon answers our question. The Talmud that said anyone who takes pleasure in Shabbat, the Talmud didn't say anyone who guards Shabbat. I'll say it in Hebrew. Talmud said kol hame'aneg et HaShabbat, not kol hashomer et HaShabbat. There's a very big difference. Taking pleasure in Shabbat, enjoying Shabbat is very different than guarding Shabbat, than keeping Shabbat. Of course we need to keep Shabbat, but when we observe the Shabbat, we have to enjoy the Shabbat. The enjoyment, says the Zera Shimshon, the enjoyment that a person receives by observing Shabbat, connecting to Hashem, and the physical enjoyment, whether it's the food your wife makes or you make, or that you have by your guests, or by the kiddush that you go to, any physical enjoyment, the extra nap and sleep we take, the l'chaim that we drink, any physical enjoyment, says Zera Shimshon, that we take part of on Shabbat, all of the prosecutors and all of that evil and judgment powers have absolutely no strength in. As long as a person has the intentions to enjoy Shabbat, that's why we're eating more challah, and that's why we're having more fish and more meat and more dessert and more l'chaim. The reason why we're doing all that, if a person's intention is we're doing that in order to enjoy the Shabbat because we are commanded to, then all of that physical attachment and enjoyment that a person has all gets considered for the good as a spiritual endeavor and not even a physical one, giving a person that boundless blessing that we're supposed to have when we're completely headed towards a spiritual connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a very, very fascinating concept. See, normally, usual forces will try to minimize the reward of enjoyment because physical pleasure is something that a human being naturally enjoys, and therefore the prosecutors and the judgment all come and say, he's enjoying, so take away from his merit. The Zera Shimshon says on Shabbat, those prosecuting powers have absolutely no power to say, look, they're just enjoying the Shabbat for the sake of the pleasure and not for the spiritual aspects. The Zera Shimshon says the Talmud is not telling us that the reward for Shabbat is limitless in a physical way. Rather, the physical enjoyment that we have on Shabbat is not bound by the usual borders. It rather has a complete enjoyment physically as well as spiritually, meaning we're not getting held back for that, which is a beautiful, beautiful concept. So practically what this means is that Shabbat is a day where we are supposed to add not only in spiritual matters, which is obvious when it comes to our prayers and Tehillim and Torah study and the singing that we have on Shabbat, the Zmirot Shabbat, but also in a physical way. We are not supposed to hold back. We are supposed to literally indulge, not overindulge, and not make it pig-like, God forbid, but rather to enjoy the Shabbat because we understand that the physical aspects that Hashem has given us in this world has certain times and places, and that great place where no accusation or prosecution against us in order to enjoy those physical pleasures is on Shabbat. So usually indulging in worldly pleasures would be considered, let's just say, detrimental to our blessings that are supposed to be coming from the pipeline of God, from Shemaim, from the heavens. On Shabbat, however, the opposite is true. Enjoying the eating and the drinking and everything is actually what gives us great merit and reward. So that's a very, very beautiful concept. I'd like to say one more point on the idea of Shabbat, and that is that nowadays, Shabbat is an easy sale. You may have heard me speak about this before. I always like to speak about this. Observing the Shabbat is an easy sale nowadays. We don't need to get too complicated or to try to come up with the greatest novelties or explanations or convictions to have people, whether it's friends or family, to start observing the Shabbat. In the world that we live in, unless we pause from our daily routine, unless we, I always use this, unplug to recharge, then we are unfortunately going to never really have a real quality of life until we pause. See, the world that we live in is just nonstop, and technology has helped it become that nonstop. You could say help, you could say destroy, you can use whichever word you want to use. But the fact that the pace of life that we are running at nowadays and the capacity of things that we do, whether it's with our minds, with our brain, with our eyes, with our mouths, with our fingers. I don't know, sometimes I have my thumbs are hurting from typing so much on my phone and texting back so much. It's like it really it's a lot. Now, obviously, we're not stopping for the physical aspects only that Shabbat has to offer, but the spiritual, the mental, the emotional aspects that Shabbat has, to just pause and stop and to reconnect with our families, to reconnect with Hashem, to reconnect with prayer, with Torah study, with sitting down and enjoying an uninterrupted meal. Unfortunately, around the world today, most people, most families cannot have a meal without an interruption, especially from whether it's a doorbell being rung or the phone, or God forbid, people who sit down and they are eating a meal while the TV is on. How rude is that? How could the TV be on during mealtime? Of course, sometimes you need to entertain, but as we entertain yourself, what I mean. But if we think about it, mealtime, according to the Torah, is actually very sacred. It's a time where we're able to connect with the food that we're eating and understanding that the nutrients that we're eating is there to give us the physical strength in order to continue on our spiritual track, and spending that very sacred and special time with our family members, sharing about your day, sharing about your week, is extremely important. So if during the week the meal has already become perverted, whether it's from technology or from outside influence or not being able to hold back from not answering the phone, at least if Shabbat can be that sacred, it is absolutely important to try to do that. So spend the time on Shabbat to reconnect with your family, to reconnect to Hashem, to reconnect to yourself, because if we do not take that time to unplug, to recharge, unfortunately, our emotional and spiritual batteries may eventually die, God forbid. So let's take this opportunity this week, this Shabbat, that the Torah recommands the Jewish people about the importance and the merit of observing Shabbat, and let's understand that just simply the benefits that we achieve and that we gain from observing the Shabbat are priceless, super, extremely important, and something that we can all really take benefit from. We mentioned some of those benefits here. There's always plenty more.